So outreach. When we hear the word outreach, what do you think about it? Often we know it's defending the rights of the poor and the needy, offering hospitality, working for justice. And how do we do all that? Well, first of all, we start with an initiative. Someone has to say, hey, why don't we try and do this? We have some interested in community. Perhaps we've seen a situation or heard of something, or we've spoken to a friend over coffee. Or maybe there's something about a global issue, climate change. Maybe when you have after church on Sunday, you're saying, well, what could we do? What could we do in our small way to make an informed decision on something that we could change in our home, or be aware of, or so that's one thing when we think about outreach. Outreach is defined by definition as the activity of So we just talked about how outreach is involving the poor and the needy, or like some situation that you hear about, and it can be a community interest or a global issue. So outreach by definition is the activity of providing services to any population that might not have access to those services. So what does that mean? A key component of outreach is the group providing it's not a stationary activity, it's a mobile activity. So, and I don't mean using wheels, but we're taking the church and we're going out into the community in some way. So that's the mobility. It means meeting someone perhaps where they are. Not to say that person isn't going to, that situation isn't going to come into the church, but most often when we begin with outreach, we're meeting someone where they are. We'll discuss a little bit later about how food can bring people into the church, but usually you're met where you are, and you immediately begin to build trust, begin to build a relationship. You offer support. And most often, all these efforts are voluntary. Outreach can have an education component. You can, like we were talking about global warming, for example, you could raise awareness. There could be an education component to it. That is also outreach. If you had a speaker come in who knew about something, then that would be an outreach situation. It also includes identification of an underserviced area and communities. And we will be mentioning the situation in Attawapiskat when we're looking at our Matthew meeting. So, Eileen, we're going to, Julie is going to read the Luke.
But he said to them, the kings of the Gentiles lord it over them, and those in authority over them are called benefactors. But not so with you. Rather, the greatest among you must become like the youngest, and the leader like one who serves. For who is greater, the one who is at the table or the one who serves? Is it not the one at the table? But I am among you as one who serves.
So this follows the Lucan account of the Last Supper. The disciples begin to argue concerning who of one of them would be the greatest. We've all read that many times. Jesus is dismayed, perhaps angry, and hurt deeply, I would imagine, at the misunderstanding of his friend Thomas. The Greek word for service in this passage is diakonio. The word form, which in the noun form becomes diaconate, and from that word we get the word deacon. In its earliest recording, the party used the word concerned waiting on a table. Or more generally, we would think of it caring or providing for the needs of others. So that's where the term deacon comes from. Okay, Louise, would you read Matthew, please?
When the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of glory. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate people one from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will put the sheep at his right hand, and the goats at the left. Then the king will say to those at his right hand, "Come, you that are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me." Then the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry and gave you food, or thirsty and gave you something to drink? And when was it that we saw you a stranger and welcomed you, or naked and gave you clothing? And when was it that we saw you sick or in prison and visited you?" And the king will answer them, "Truly I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these who are members of my family, you did it to me."
Thank you for reading that. I will know that that's a gospel that I never get through without the tears flowing. It's always so I thought, I'll have something to read. How brilliant.
Very wise.
Very wise. So to feed the hungry is, we think about having food banks and we think about having donations of whatever we're doing, but trying to seek to overcome poverty is a huge, and it involves a lot of things. It involves government, it involves global warming, it involves other countries, it involves more things that I'm sure I can even remember. It also means, though, as top of that, is that as Christians, we are concerned about the growth, increase of hunger in the world and the shortage of clean water around the globe. So we ask ourselves, do we take the initiative? Are we taking the initiative to be concerned to promote the technical skills that we have in the world to find that solution? And it's a complicated situation. Why does Attawakaskat in Ontario not have clean drinking water? Mind-boggling. Well, their emergency started in 2019. Before that, there was a housing crisis in 2011. So that's getting to be quite a few years ago. So you have a housing crisis. They're on a reservation. They get their water from the Attawakaskat. They want to get their water from the Attawakaskat River. Right now, they get their water from what appears to be a little bog of water that nothing runs through it. So of course the water gets contaminated. And there you go. Because of the housing crisis, they had sewers backing up. So you've got the sewers backing up, you've got the bog of water. Okay, so then the government is informed. Now you would think the government with their MP would, try to fix this. But then we get into the land. They have their own particular area of land, but it's an indigenous land that is vast and it has some pretty important water in it that could be used, but they're just seem to go back and forth and back and forth, and we still don't have drinking water. In 2017, I think it was, or, 2017, 2020, between those years, they did get some mobile homes in to try to, have a little more efficient, means of clean water and means to clean the water, purify the water. But by that time, because of the homeless, the lack of housing, now there's a problem of homelessness, opioid problem, and the alcohol problem. So now in 2024, we've got opioids, we've got homeless, we've got alcoholics, we've got every mental health problems, and we still don't have drinking water. So we read in the paper that people in the Sudan are starving. So what do we do? Well, we can send ships with loads of grain. So that sounds great. And makes us feel good, doesn't it? And to send some grain to the Sudan or to wherever we want to talk, doesn't really matter. But it's a one-time stopgap thing. We do it once. They get some help. It's an act of charity, so that's always makes us good. It gives us a gratifying feeling that it helps our egos to think that we paid attention and we sent some grain to the Sudan. Okay. But then do we follow up on that? Do we, and as Christians and concerned people, do we, when we read about it, do we go back and write some letters and make some noise, or even just talk about it amongst ourselves? Or what are we doing? Are we doing anything to really help with the food shortage? Do we ever stop in our days when we're making our supper, lunch, breakfast, and have a pain of guilt because of the abundance of food that we have? When we scrape our plates into, now there's always a little bit of waste, but, oh, I put too much on my plate, so I'll put it into the compost bin. When you see the compost bins going down, they'll have our big fancy bins, and those compost bins are pretty full. Wow, we're throwing that food. While we're throwing out our food, are we mindful of how the food was made? How it was produced? What efforts went into it? Do we need that second helping of, sure, do we need to say, we joke about having a second piece of cake, but do we need, even if it's really good food, do we need as much as we're eating? I think we just sometimes need to, I'm not saying we need to be on diets, but just aware of the food we get and how easily we get it. If you want an apple, we just go to the store. You want an orange, well, we just go to the store. For the next generation coming up, for the children, the teenagers, the young people, the 30s, I think they're watching us. I think they do. And are we teaching and living by example that encourages moderation? The boomers seem to be pretty in a society where we work hard and we want to be, we have it, so we can have it, so we do have it. Thinking about water and being thirsty for Matthew, I wonder when you're out for a walk in the summertime and you watch the sprinklers going back and forth, watering lawns, with food. And I must say, I almost have to bite my tongue. I have a neighbor that washes his car every Sunday morning with please using clean drinking water to wash his car. And that bothers me. But, you know, we can talk about bottled water. The same thing. So then Matthew talks about welcoming the stranger. Not just the refugees, not just our Ukrainian friends, but anyone who comes into our community, into our neighborhood, who is homeless. So, greeting someone that is homeless, we need to be imaginative. We need to be constructive in how we're greeting them. Maybe it's not just saying hello. It's taking that time to build a relationship. Well, ultimately, that's what outreach is all about, building a relationship, offering some trust, encouraging, listening. We can't spend, you know, some days we have things to do and appointments to get to. But sometimes we can just take 5 minutes and talk to someone, ask them how they are. Most likely they'll say, at least to me, even though a caller, they'll say, you go to church. I'll say, yes, I do. And what church do you go to? Well, sometimes I go to Prince of Peace in South Beach. Sometimes I go to Collingwood. Sometimes, mostly, I'm in Fremont. Just listen. Listen, there's a young man I speak to quite a bit by Tim Hortons. And he has 3 different names. You never know what his name is today, but that's okay. He'll correct me. I call him by the last name that he told me last week, but it's different today. And okay, sorry, I'm gonna remember that. It's not offering a cure or a fix of their brokenness, but often just being there to listen to someone. And it's recognizing the loneliness in our society. We all shut our doors, we all pull our blinds down, we all have our lives, and there's just loneliness right beside us. As you know, from being part of a faith community, it's more likely that you're going to have someone thinking about you if you're sick. We hear that Bill is sick. Well, he might get a card, he might get a phone call, somebody might call Julie. We might call somebody else to see how Eileen is, if we heard she wasn't doing well. And we know that. Even if we don't know how many people were thinking about us, but we know as a family of faith that there are people that are always going to be thinking about us, asking us how we are. Even if we're not sick, we feel all right. Well, you know, most of the time we'll say, oh, we're good, but, you know, sometimes you might just say, you know, it might have the opportunity to say, well, you know, my foot hurts. Or whatever. Matthew says we need to clothe the naked. Providing clothes, okay, but that also means, I think, clothing gets us into providing protection against the elements. Protection against the elements and proper clothing also enables privacy. You're living on the street, you're out in, you have any privacy. I can't imagine you know, that feel up. I'm an extrovert, but that's fine, but you still need that element of privacy, and giving that the clothing and the home and trying to solve homelessness, which is, you know, a huge thing. But it also involves the elderly and the people in low income groups who tend to be more isolated than those who have a secure income. Providing how can we provide encouragement for people elderly living in nursing homes or assisted living? I see it this year with a couple that I visit. The man is in fairly good health for his age. But when he was sitting in his home, he could see his community. He would see his neighbors walk up and down. He could go to the post office, go to the store, or not go out. It's not always about going out, it's just having the windows to be able to be seen. Now, everyone in this care home, in this retirement home, they all have their own place. They all shut their doors when they go in. So there isn't any community, really. Not at all. It's hard to get a conversation going on at the lunch table. People have hearing problems, and just because you're in a retirement home, you can have some limitations, cognitively and otherwise. So you've taken away that sense of community, and that is huge in terms of self-worth, in terms of mental health. And just in happiness. So I think for the elderly in the home and in terms of clothing means a lot more than just sweaters and pants. Now, he says we are to visit the sick and care for them. Well, of course we are, and we do that. It also involves supporting their spiritual needs and as well as their physical needs when they're living, providing understanding. We can advocate that our communities have adequate facilities. Lasagna Beach, for example, needs, well, everybody needs more doctors, needs everything. Clinics, nurse practitioners, chaplains, social workers, dietitians. Part of the outreach that we have at St. Luke's that developed through the food bank was people would contact me and want to we've had slow cooking, learn how to make 3 meals from a slow cooker recipe. You get 3 meals out of it. In the spring, we're having a dietitian come. I didn't know we had a dietitian, but we do. And she's gonna come and talk about diabetes and high blood pressure and all that kind of good stuff. Mental health workers. And interestingly enough, you can make a call you can call your MP, or you can call the mayor, or you can call all the people that might have some control over what services you're going to get into the community. And you might find that there are some people that are willing to help and can give you some suggestions on how you might help, how you can form a group that like promotes another clinic, like how do you do that, who you have to write to, how much noise do you have to make. It's also, it can be frustrating when you call a social worker every week for a year, citing the same issues, and that person on the other end of the phone says, but you're bringing them food. I'm saying, but the need is here, and I'm bringing them food, and we're not getting any closer to a balance, right? And fortunately, that person now lives on. We are called to visit the people in the prison. That can be complicated, agreed. But what about the rehabilitation of people when they come out of prison? They've had that experience. We have chaplains that help with that and volunteer work. It's probably not something we can do easily in this area because we don't have prisons or halfway houses or any type of institutions like that. But we know about the enslavement of, the prejudices that come out when someone's been in jail. And we can say, well, he was in jail, so, you know, she did this, whatever it is, and now she was in jail, but now she's out. So there's gonna be the guilt, there's gonna be the after effects of being in the jail. Someone that's been incarcerated, they were incarcerated, but now they're not. And how do they get on? How can we help them get on with their lives? Become part of the community. We know there's somebody living in your area that has been in jail. Maybe they want to talk about it, maybe they don't.
We definitely get people coming out of penitentiary at the bank.
Yeah. You know, but that social worker would say to me, but, you know, he would patronize me, when I was near the end of the conversation, when he was gonna say, I'm not doing anything, you come to Reverend. He said, well, Reverend, you're helping him, he's got you. But I'm not a social worker, and I can't make his meals, he can't make his meals, we had, new grads put in his home. He registered things, and, the person that installed it put a thermostat and set it, so he didn't have to touch it. So we'd be going to deliver the food one day, and it's 20 below last winter, and the doors are wide open, and I'm thinking, why did they got the doors open? Well, because he cranked the heat up, because he could not leave that darn thermostat alone. So he cranked it up, and it would get to be 86 degrees, so we'd have to open the windows and the doors. Or we'd be going, next week we'd go, he's got his focus hat on, because he thought it was a little warm, so he turned it off. And I said, just wait, but if you can't, you can't.
And for some people, like, they need supportive housing, like, they can't quite cope.
Can't do that.
But there's supportive housing, that's what he needs.
He needs,
But,
there isn't any.
right. Right. And if I condemn, I could have called the fire marshal or the board of health, you know, and they condemn his home, but then I felt bad, because then of course he'd be on the street. And of course, where is he now? On the street.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Who's gonna read? Oh, yeah.
You want John or?
Um. Can you read the one, John, both, please?
Okay. We know love by this, that he laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for one another.
So I think we all recognize here that we are being asked to, when we see a brother and sister in need, that, we are called to help that person. We are God's agents in the world when we see someone who needs help. So how do we become, how do we support, how do we be that agent? We certainly don't do it, by ourselves. I would think if someone has a vision, you try and build a team, talk about it. Talk about it in a ministry meeting, or to your friends, or talk about it to someone who, doesn't even go to church. There's a concept. Start small. Like we talked about, you know, Anglicanism doesn't have water. Well, that's a huge thing, but the energy will grow and the interest will grow in what you do if you start small and you get some interest from someone who says, oh, I'm interested in that. Oh, I could do that or whatever it is. Most outreach I find is, it's informal. As Anglicans, we do have our, you know, we have our pageantry, we have our purpose for lots of things in the church. Outreach will be outside the building most often, and can be, a simple act of kindness. Share your time, share your talents, that also can be considered as outreach. Remember that when we're out in the world, we're meeting people, we're being respectful, we're listening, and we're meeting them where they are. We're trying to build trust and encourage a relationship. I have that relationship with the man with the 3 or 4 names. I call it a relationship because he knows my name. He calls me by my name. His name is James. And I heard a little bit about his story. And he's living in a shelter in South Beach, just in a motel. It's survived. He got 15. He likes chocolate cookies, and he likes oranges. He needed a new toothbrush. We got that. So he's trying to look after himself. He tells me that he has a daughter out west, and he's going to go visit. Maybe that's his way of trying to say this. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. But he's in that time, he's still talking about something that might be pleasant. Maybe he has visited out west, or maybe he has gone. It's not the point that it's not really lying. That doesn't matter. It's just a few minutes talking to him, and I can say, oh, I've been out west. You know, you're going to British Columbia, you're going to Alberta, you've been to the mountains, you know. So we're going to meet people in the supermarkets, in the Y, any place that has a good place for putting up posters. You can see, oh, somebody's doing this, somebody else has an idea for that. And of course, we all have our phones and those other things. So we know there's lots of ideas happening. Everybody knows what everybody's doing. And I guess the other point I'd like to make is when you did that team, even if it's just 1 or 2 people, it's a safe place, right? We do this with trust and with dignity for each other and for those we serve. So we also know that our team has our back. We're not doing this alone. My friend, the Reverend Allison Kemper, I had a FaceTime with her. She is involved with the LGBTQ community in Toronto. The Reverend Eric Martin and Sister Kit Woods that are in the Newmarket now area. They provide a safe place for teens that are non-binary and are gay and in that category. I didn't know that Hollywood has a pride group. Didn't know that. I don't know much about that, so I'll have to learn about that. One thing Allison said, Allison she's very well educated, she can be very outspoken. She said, these new pronouns, like I know I'm gonna make a mistake. I say to my granddaughter, I know it, you know, I'm gonna make a mistake and I'm sorry because it's different. I don't really understand, I don't understand the they, how one person can be they, it rattles my brains. But for these kids that are 20, in their 20s, and these teenagers, it's just not, they understand it, they get it, they don't make mistakes. So that's for us to, you know, to try. And she also pointed out that most often in a family, there will be, if there's teenagers or young people, there's probably going to be a parent or a grandparent who's going to have a family member that's gay or changing their identity that is not spoken about. He said more often than not, it's not that it's pretty prominent. We just don't talk about it, and we don't want to see it, and we don't want to accept it, because it's not the norm. But she said it's more often out there, and it's our generation that's having a hard time with it, not the younger kids. So as we serve in our outreach, we fulfill our commitment to be God's agents and instruments in the world. So, with a few more minutes, still gotta go. So what do we get from outreach? What do we get, right? We're doing all this stuff. Well, personal growth. You can learn new things. You can challenge yourself. You can discover that you really are interested in something that you didn't know you were interested in. You learn about cultural awareness, different cultures, different people, and with that comes different perspectives and different backgrounds of people that change their whole look on society and their mindset. That might not just be North American Canadian. We get a sense of fulfillment, of gratitude and purpose. Outreach helps build social connections, meeting new people, expanding your network, making new friends, seeing friends that you already have, experiencing that more. If you were in an age group, you might gain some experience that might help with a job employment, or help you with your portfolio. Helping people and reaching out to others, hearing their stories can also help us, reduce our own strength and our own stress and anxiety. We all carry something, but sometimes speaking with someone or a group of people that are far, or seeing it, just witnessing it, seeing that they're far worse off than we are. Where it means we're active, so it helps our physical, we're staying active, and that's always good. The other thing I think that is important is there's a ripple effect, and we've seen that in Greenmore. Something that started small, and it builds, and now we're doing something else, and now we're doing something else, and now we're having a food budgeting workshop. And then we're going to have, people kind of get on this, because they say, hey, these people are really, they're doing something. They're doing something. There's something about being a faith group of faith people, the outside, the non-churchy people, shall I say, they have this idea that if they just haven't ever been raised in church, they think that we come in and we pray and that's what we do. But when they can see what you're doing and why you're doing it, and for whom you're doing it, and called to do, then they think, oh, I can do that. May not mean they're going to come and sit with you on Sunday, but it might. It might. We have a couple of, I would say most of our new members, would you say, Eileen, we have a few people that are coming the last couple of years that came to the food bank, and yes, they all have challenges. And sometimes the police arrive in the middle of the church service, but that's okay.
We have for them too. It's a place to come and meet friends and talk, which is easier for them.
Yes.
That's what I find anyway. I think that's the way they look at it.
Yeah. And you have a cup of coffee, or, they sing and they, and they take communion, for whatever that means to them. Like, I wouldn't necessarily say they're anything, but you might say that, So I think if you wanted to get started on a new initiative, you have a goal and, have some people that can help you start small and enjoy the work. It has to be something you enjoy doing. And we're on Friday mornings, Sharon will come down, she'll say, I'm coming down to laugh. I'll say, okay. So I learned, I make up all the lists, for the loading of the vehicles and the shopping list, and Angie has her list, she works on the pastries and the fees and the pay. So I get all these lists, and I was always, one day we spent 40 minutes looking for my list. So now I pin it to my shirt. And all the pictures of me eating on Friday, I've got this big, it's all my list. You go into the grocery store, and they'll say, here she comes, she's got her list, it's pinned to her. Well, otherwise, there's just, between that and my phone, I can't. And my keys, so, I'm sorry, I pin it everywhere, I have a nice big clip. So I put it to myself. So we laugh, and we have, mostly we laugh at me, but that's okay. So I think outreach is also not just solving an immediate need. That's easy enough to do as well, depending what it is, but, also knowing in your community what 211 can do, what the OPP can do, what the paramedics can do, what all these kinds of things, what they can do, can help people. So just, there are options. It's not great. We need more services, but there are some opportunities there. So, outreach, I think, is a shared ministry. It's a shared opportunity. It's a shared responsibility that we're all called to do. Bill, we didn't get to read a piece. Okay.
Shall I?
Yes, please.
You were taught to cut away your former way of life. Your old self, corrupt and deluded by its lusts, to be renewed in the spirit of your minds, and to clothe yourselves with new self, created according to the likeness of God, in true righteousness and holiness. So then, putting away falsehood, let us all of us speak the truth to our neighbors, for we are members of one another.
I think that pretty much says it. Doesn't it?
Members of one another really makes me think too that we often fall into the using they language with outreach. And I was we had a meeting of all the different helping agencies that help in Wasaga Beach at the library that Wendy Moore put together. And one of the guys who came was a food bank client who lives in a van. And when he spoke about what we need, not what they need.
Yes.
And it changed the whole conversation because he was saying, we need this and we need that. And, we need supportive housing. And it was the conversation changed very much from the housing worker guy from the Simcoe County,
Right.
who was very much about the programs for the people. And it just changed the conversation that, we are all members of the same body and how we're all, we could be living in the van.
Well, the man in Simcoe County, he wasn't living in a van.
He never lived in a van.
Well, exactly.
So you better listen to develop, here's what we need.
Yeah.
As opposed to.
And I mean, sometimes you can't, but when you can, when you come alongside people, like you do in food ministry, like you do in the food bank, where you come alongside people and you get to know them and make that relationship, then I think things start to happen. But I think, Lorna, you're also right. Sometimes you just see a need. There's a group, I think Julie might have seen it on Facebook, a group of women who are fairly outraged about the people living in tents. And organizing a meeting and organizing some food to be brought and basically stirring up some activity. But you know, there have been people living in tents for years here. And it's,
Have you seen the tent by the superstore? You know where the superstore is?
Yeah.
The Starbucks.
Yeah.
Well, you come out of Starbucks and you have to go on that little street.
Mhm.
If you look into the bush, there's a tent.
Yeah.
Often there's a car park.
Yeah.
On the side, sort of in the snowbank now.
Yeah.
And it's just a little tent.
and I met, there was one woman who came here for mittens. We put out 250 bags of mittens and things out already this year. She came for mittens. There weren't any. At that moment, there were none. And I gave her socks. What I had. Her little hands were frozen. And then I had 2 pairs. I said, oh, I'll leave one in case someone else needs it.
Because they've been cold, so they think.
She knows. And she's living in a tent behind the food lamp. And her kids are staying with the grandmother in a bachelor apartment. Because there's no room for her.
No.
And so we had a nice talk, and, but it starts with that. And I think that sometimes those people are sent to enrage us, so that we do call the government, or whoever is in charge, and say, well, why is there no housing? And this young mother was on the waiting list for the shelter because it was full.
Yeah. We've had a couple of success stories. You know what, statistics tell you that once you go to a food bank, you're on the food bank. You're not gonna get yourself out of coming to the food bank. We have had a couple of single moms in town, in Fremont, that, needed help. Sure, we brought it. And after a year, she called me and she said, you you encouraged me. And then she told me the story that, she had run out her credit card. So now you're trying to pay $20 here, $15 there. So the food made it so she had a little extra money. She sat herself down. She's not a stupid woman. She sat herself down, made a budget. Just then, she got a little extra work at work and got a little pay raise. Just a few little cents, not much, but every little bit counts. And she got her credit card paid off, and she doesn't need the food bank, and she did it.
That's wonderful.
Yes.
Success stories.
Yes.
There are success stories.
You just wonder how many are there of
Yeah.
those stories.
It's,
But there are so many people with mental health issues and so on. They'll always, when there's so many people out there.
do you think, I mean, I'm 68, but do you think in the 50s or the 60s, proportionately, are there more people now? Like, why is it? Is it more, did we look after everyone else better in those days? Or are there just more people with problems because of our society? Or did everybody have gardens and had the opportunity to have a house and I often wonder about that.
When
That's a
you,
good question.
when you read some reports on old newspapers, even in the 20s and 30s during the Depression, they talk about all the people that are homeless. And yet you didn't hear it in the 50s and 60s.
We have a family friend who lived, his dad was the caretaker at what he called an asylum. So, and he played with the kids who were born there. So so some people were institutionalized. So I think that we didn't see them because they were put away.
Yeah.
That's really.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think that's part of it.
But the percentage, I think, were far less. Why is it in our society that they would have such a need for food banks that will be in existence? But I don't wear it anymore.
I don't know, my grandmother, now this is England, granted, my grandmother was well known because beggars used to go door to door. And if you had a bench outside your side door, that meant that you were willing to give up food. And they would go from house to house. And my dad says he remembers there being almost always somebody on the bench.
Yep.
And if it was bad weather, they came in and she'd give them a cup of tea.
Yeah.
And a sandwich or whatever. But there was always somebody every day at their house, and they roamed.
Yeah, yeah.
And now I think if you knock at someone's door, no, they wouldn't even open the door, right?
Oh, it's all the place for
So I think that the society has changed.
Oh,
Well,
don't forget,
I don't know if it's more or less, I don't even.
when was it in, when I was teaching in Toronto, conservatory, we had a piano teacher, she was single and she was older than I was, but she ended up in, 99 Queen Street.
Mm-hmm.
And then they closed it,
Mhm.
and they just put people on the street. Well, golly. Yesterday, I was at David Busby, dropping off a van load of, clothes and sweaters and socks and everything, so that was great. I was going in the door, you know, there's always gentlemen outside the doors, and they're always very helpful to come and unload and, you know, they'll hold the door for you. So I was bringing in, I had a bag and had a pink sweater on the top, and this woman just coming in behind me said, "Oh, a pink sweater." And I said, "There you go." And she was just delighted. It was just a zipper kangaroo thing, you know, but they, and we brought in, there were 2 sleeping bags. And we took them right out to the van that was there, you know, the street van, so they could give that out. And we were talking to this young man that was working there, and he just said, Sharon came with me, and Sharon said, "Oh, you work?" And he said, "No, I work outside, I'm normal." So this man did this job, he works outside, just seeing who's what, who's where, and who needs help, and who's, you know, balancing. It's a busy time.
And I do think in modern society, it's harder for some people to find a place and purpose. Because they're unusual. They see things in a different way. They have voices in their head. They're not good at reading. I mean, never mind using a computer. And I think there are fewer places for people like that to live with dignity and have a sense of purpose. And, you know, I think in the past, there were more jobs for people like that. There was more.
That man that was helping, he has, I was talking to him early on, and I said, "Oh, did you finish high school?" He said, "Yes, I did. I graduated from CCI in the life skills class."
Yeah.
There we are. His parents, so he's never worked. What he did, his dad cut the grass on the base, had a grass cutting business. So this young man, would go with his dad and work the workers. So his dad would say, "Grass, and do this, do that." His mom would say, "Here's your supper. It's time to have a shower." And then in COVID, both his parents died. He needs assisted living. He can't do it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, so I mean, somehow the system got broken down. I mean, didn't know the parents. I mean, perhaps the parents, I can't imagine that mother would have told she died at home. She would have frozen. But they had single pane windows with cracks in them, and the wood stove, the pipe only comes halfway down the ceiling, so we had to use these old silly baseboard heaters. Wonderful, the place didn't go. But maybe the dad and mom weren't, educated and they didn't, you know, the will's a mess. They just left him. And where did he go?
But there's something over time has eroded. Is it our morals? Is it our way of life? Is it, But there's a whole lot more than.
Our privilege.
Selfishness,
Well, there's a lot of privilege, but there's,
selfishness.
why is there so many people like this? So many homeless, so many on welfare, so many need. I don't know, I don't have an answer, I don't know if anybody does, but
No.
why,
No.
we think we prospered in this world, in this life, but we,
And then there's so many scams out there too, where people have posed as needing things and
Mhm.
then someone will say, oh yeah, they posted that in this community too.
Why would you do that?
Right.
I think her.
So then people are discouraged from doing anything because it might be a scam,
well,
right? Like,
Yeah,
Yeah.
especially online.
I think it is a bit of isolation, like it's the other side of loneliness is that isolation, we close our doors. I mean, people don't sit on their front porch. They don't see their community. They're, I mean, parts of Wasaga are a little different. They do have a sense of community but most of society, people live their own little life,
Everything is.
collect their stuff for them to keep.
There's structure, yeah, that's it.
Everything is too structured. When I was young, you went out and played,
And came home in the street.
Like structured, you didn't have anything lined up for it. Nowadays, children are taking places, they're in organized sports, it's all very organized.
And it's all very busy, and
That's it.
nowadays, you have to have two people working almost to pay the mortgage, to pay the rent. And then you take your kids, you take them here, you take them there, and it's all, the schedule on the fridge. Who's taking Johnny to soccer, and who's taking Elizabeth to ballet, and
I wasn't even available to the kids. None of that was. No.
it's amazing you grew up,
Exactly. We had a pretty good, I think we had a wonderful life, we lived in a poor area, you just didn't know any better. And
Because you played with
came up
kids, and you were
some-
just,
That's right, and your parents taught you right from wrong,
That's right.
and that sort of thing where, I don't know, the whole world, then they say that none of the billionaires or something are increasing,
The rich
every
get
couple of
richer.
years.
well, I don't know if you know about
So-
flash food. It's on, Sobeys and the superstore. Well, it was announced yesterday that instead of getting the food 50% off, it's only gonna be 30% off, because, big owners of Sobeys just aren't making quite enough money.
And it's already food that's practically expired.
So you're gonna make money on the people that need it, I mean, that's,
And make money on the food that's 2 days away from being garbage.
right, but you're gonna make money on it because you need more, they need to make more money.
Yeah, but that's just one of them.
Well,
Zillion problems. But, what, is considered. I think so much of this has been done, we were talking about your kids go everywhere. They're into all kinds of sports, organized sports. People can't come to church on Sunday when they're. You have a cell phone, every kid, has got a cell phone, gosh, I'm talking. Everybody's got 3 TVs in their house, at least 2 cars. Everybody's working. And I think. Right.
You don't live in my life.
No, I mean, the kids
Houses on
are,
Randall-
mom and dad, everybody works.
the houses on Randallwood that they just built,
Yeah.
they all have, if not 3-car garages, they all have 2-car garages.
But that's one garage for your car and one garage for your junk.
Well, they're
Well,
lucky if they
but-
either would for. There's only worth $500 worth of junk. And
So much
$50,000
stuff.
Right.
Unbelievable.
I'm sorry,
I know, you got,
I'm sorry, excuse me.
No,
I think it's a bit of greed and selfishness, I think.
Reading selfishness, yeah, we're all,
well, we have to keep up with our neighbors. And if they have 2 cars, then we have to have.
just like in the States, somebody's got a gun, but I gotta have a bigger one.
Right.
Find and kill the other guy fast,
Unbelievable.
Nuts. Sorry, get me going here.
We can only help our little corner.
Bill.
Have a good day, folks.
We can only help our little corner.
So that's,
I just think that even though the world is a dire and sad place, we can't stop trying.
no, of course not. Oh, yeah, sorry. And some things will fail, some things won't, some things won't get off the ground.
But you have to try, you're right.
You have to try.